Welcome, I'm Hernan Murdoch. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at engagement planning. To help us better understand what happens during engagement planning, we have with us Kathleen Crawford, who is our subject matter expert on all things auditing today, and she'll help us better understand what the standards say about engagement planning. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hello, Hernan.
So, what do the standards say about engagement planning? What should auditors keep in mind as they go about preparing and planning for their audit or consulting engagement?
Well, we have a few things that we need to keep in mind. Our first graphic tells us that Standard 2200 says that internal auditors must develop and document a plan for each engagement. So that's pretty cut and dried, and as you might expect. But it goes on to say that we have to include our objectives, the scope, the timing, and resource allocations. So that's the first part of it. The second part is
So,
that, oh, go ahead.
Um, yeah, no, just because something about that makes me think number one that you can't just show up and say, okay, I'm going to do this engagement and not have a plan as to what you're going to do. So
Right.
it's very important to make sure that you do that. But it says that it needs to be documented. So um, there's this thing about work papers. Is this considered a work paper already?
It will be, it's going to prompt two deliverables. There will be an engagement memo that goes to the client in terms of what our ultimate decisions are, in terms of what we're going to look at, the area, the process, the system, and some of the frame of what our project will be. There will also
Right.
be a planning memo that will come out of that. So following these standards and doing the kind of planning in terms of collecting business intelligence on the area, process, or system is what planning is and what results in those two deliverables. So you could
Okay.
argue that it prompts the creation of some work papers.
Okay, so and what I wanted to clarify is that as auditors think about planning, it's not just because the standards say you need to go ahead and plan, and it is going to be buried somewhere. It's like, okay, boss, I'm done. I got a plan for you, but it needs to be documented well. You need to do a
Yes.
thorough job at this because there are going to be some deliverables that you need to provide to the client and to management within audit as well. And if your work papers are reviewed in the future, you need to demonstrate that you went through this exercise. So this is an important aspect of the audit engagement. So yes, thank you very much for
Yeah.
clarifying that. I just wanted to be clear about it. So
Well,
what else does the standard? Okay,
I'd
go ahead.
also
Yes.
I'd also say that we have a couple of different standards that we're going to look at. So in addition to this, we have a couple more coming up. But your question prompts me to think about Stephen Covey's famous saying, "Begin with the end in mind." That's
Yes.
really what these standards set us up to do, is to begin with the end in mind. Where we
Mhm.
are going to do a project, we are going to make some decisions about what we're going to look at and how we're going to document the correctness or incorrectness of those activities. So we are going to be creating work product. We are going to be following a path. That path is going to be determined by how robust or how uh, detailed our planning is. And that's why these standards make sure to lay out the importance of having a path to follow and considering the phases in the audit itself.
Kathleen, thank you. That is very helpful. So what else does Standard 2200 say?
Standard 2200 goes on to say that our plan must consider the organization's strategies, objectives, and risks relevant to this engagement, to the engagement that we're planning. So we're looking at a myriad of things that have to be taken into account so that we will make a good plan. And if everything flows from the plan, that we will have a good result.
Excellent. Okay. So as we look at planning considerations, what other things should we keep in mind?
Sure. The next graphic will tell us about Standard 2201, planning considerations. So in planning the engagement, the internal auditors must consider strategies and objectives of the activity being reviewed and the means by which activity controls its performance. So this is a this is actually something that we might need to break out into two pieces when we are actually looking at these areas, processes, and systems. Significant risks to the activity's objectives, to their resources, to operations, and the means by which the potential impact of risk is kept to an acceptable level. This links back to earlier episodes on risk assessment and making sure that that part of the process is as robust as it needs to be. The governance structure of the activity, the adequacy and effectiveness of activities governance, its risk management, its control processes, as compared to a relevant framework or model. So we would expect that they have a model, that they're following it, and that it is
Hmm.
clear on its face that they're maintaining consistency with whatever the risk appetite is.
Okay.
Lastly, opportunities for making significant improvements to the governance, risk management, and control processes. So this is quite a mouthful. And as you can appreciate, that there are lots of parts and pieces to this that we want to be attentive to in the work that we do.
So as we look at this, then it looks to me like we need to take a look at the strategies and objectives.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the risks or the challenges to the achievement of those objectives. We're looking at the controls and governance, which governance by definition, and it can be lengthy definition, of course, with governance, but generally speaking, governance has to do with the structure, the general arrangement, the responsibility assignments and accountability, supervision that happens within an area. So we have the objectives, we have the risks, we have the controls and governance around it. And then all of these things need to be kept in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that helps a little bit because, like you said, there's quite a bit there, but in general sense, that's what this is about. And as far as the planning considerations, are there other things we need to keep in mind? Governance was mentioned several times, right?
Sure. And why don't we talk a little bit more about that? Another standard, 2110, specifically speaks to governance. The internal audit activity must assess and make appropriate recommendations to improve governance processes. So if there are any observations in the realm of governance, that's strategy and operational decisions, we want to make sure that that the client is attuned to what we've seen and what we've concluded. So we want to make sure that we make appropriate assessments and appropriate recommendations around the strategic and operational decision making, overseeing risk management and control, that management promotes appropriate ethics and values within the organization. So
Hmm.
this is an entire constellation of concerns, of risks, that surround the specific areas, processes, and systems that we're looking at. Further, it talks about communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of the organization and coordinating the activities of and communicating the information among the board, external and internal auditors, other assurance providers, and management.
Quite a few things here. But at the beginning is very telling as well, because it's not just assessing, but it's also making recommendations for improvement. So don't just get stuck in the problem statement or problem mode, but think in terms of what can be done to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to start that. And then, of course, it breaks it down into different areas and quite a few of those, which once again, if we think about what internal auditors do, there's quite a bit of scope there in
Mm-hmm.
terms of going beyond accounting and finance. We're looking at a lot of management concepts, a lot of leadership concepts, a lot of governance, risk, compliance, control. Performance management is also mentioned there. So, as we think about what we do, this begs for internal auditors to also think about what it takes to run a business effectively and make sure that they don't forget about those elements that make or break organizations. So thank you very much, Kathleen. It was very helpful to have you here with us to help us understand these better and to make sure that when we're planning, that we do so the right way. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you like this series, subscribe to the ACI Learning YouTube channel to enjoy more audit-related content.